A legendary high school speech and debate coach, Alan Shumate, passed away not long ago. Hello, I'm Randy Roberts. Coach Shumate had a tremendous influence on my legal career and my life. His final wishes included a request that 2 of his former debate students speak at his funeral. A video happened to catch the unique way that Jack Peppard and I honored our debate coach's request, and it's been suggested that we share it with you. Alan Shumate was our teacher, our friend, and our mentor. When Jack Peppard told me that he had found where Alan Shumate had written down that he wanted us to speak at his funeral, Jack and I both knew that we were not capable of coming up with the words to adequately honor Alan Shumate. We also knew that even if we could find those words, we were not emotionally strong enough to give that kind of speech. So, after Jack rejected my idea that we simply tell everyone that Mr. Shumate chose 2 other people, it occurred to us that perhaps it might be appropriate to honor the greatest high school debate coach in Texas history, thanks, by Jack and I debating Alan Shumate this morning. So, we've asked Robert Hahn, come on up, Robert, to serve as a neutral moderator. And Robert is going to present the 5 issues that Jack and I are going to debate. One at a time.
Thank you. Thank you. Believe me, I'm no speech guy. I was no debater. So, there you go. First of all, did people know where Alan Shumate stood?
One of the things that Coach Shumate taught me was that sometimes you can be more persuasive by asking a rhetorical question than making an argument. So let me begin by asking, is there anyone here who did not know where Alan Shumate stood on any issue? Not only did you know where he stood, but you knew where you stood with him. The difference between Alan Shumate and some people that express their minds was that he also welcomed differing viewpoints. He tolerated and was tolerant of different viewpoints, particularly if you could explain your position. But he was always trying to persuade you to his viewpoint. Even when he gave up on trying to bring me around to his political philosophy, when I would come over to his house, he made sure that he reached down and turned up the volume on the Fox News channel so I would hear it.
Well, that's real good, Randy, but I have real proof that you always knew where Alan Shumate stood. As I was perusing his instructions for how this service should be conducted, which were handwritten in that perfect handwriting of his, he went through the specific things about the music he wanted, the people he wanted to sing. He talked about who the appropriate ministers would be, and Wes, you're great. But if you know Shumate, you know he didn't stop there, because he also listed that one individual in the world that under no circumstance was to do this service. And to make sure we didn't miss it, he underlined it and highlighted it. Now, I'm not going to share with you who that is, but if you have $500, I might be persuaded after this is over with.
Okay, number 2. Would Alan Shumate go to bat for people?
Alan Shumate would always go to bat for you if you were right. But more than that, he would do anything to help you, particularly if you were a young person in need of a helping hand. I cannot count the number of letters of recommendation he wrote for me so that I would receive scholarships, so that I could attend the University of Texas. And that's why when a young person asks me to write a letter of recommendation, I always do it. And I try to put a lot of time and thought into it, because that's my way of showing my appreciation to Alan Shumate.
Of course, Alan Shumate would go to bat for you. There's a fine Christian university in East Texas over in Longview called LeTourneau. Those of you that have been involved in speech activities know that they held many, many debate tournaments, very well-respected debate tournaments, and at the end of those tournaments, there was a big convocation room that held probably 300 people, and it had a big curved area in the front that was full of blackboards that you could slide in front and screens that you pull down. Well, at one debate tournament over there, there was a student who, unbeknownst to anyone else, snuck into that room prior to the final convocation and took a Playboy centerfold and taped on the front wall, at which point that student pulled the screen down for the overhead projector so no one would see it. Now, that student must have known that when it came to the end of that convocation, that debate tournament, that the president of the university would walk in proudly, as he always did, and noticing that the screen was down over the results and some of the things he'd written on those blackboards, he would reach back and raise that screen. Well, just as they had planned, he strode in proudly, and without paying much attention, because he'd done it 100 times before, he popped the screen and turned to the audience, and it broke into uproarious laughter. Shumate laughed. Shumate's team laughed. They ended up winning most of the trophies, as they always did. No one knew who had done that, maybe. For the next week or so, Alan Shumate had a very quiet conversation with a student, Randy, that he knew had put that centerfold up there. And he let him know in no uncertain terms that that probably shouldn't happen again. Just like a good modern-day football coach whose best player has messed up with the law, Alan Shumate went to bat for Randy and never let anyone know what had happened. So don't tell anybody.
Okay, third item. Was Alan Shumate a man of integrity?
Before I respond to that, I'll let you know that I never admitted to it. Alan Shumate would always do what he thought was right, regardless of what others thought or what the consequences were. He was honest in word and deed. I was smart enough never to ask him, but I often wondered how he felt about the fact that so many of his debate students became lawyers.
He was definitely a man of integrity. Most people with integrity don't use that fact to get what they want, but he did on one occasion. For when I was a senior, I had the unfortunate occurrence of having to play in a baseball game, an important baseball game, at the field at Robert E. Lee, and just about the time that game was supposed to end, I was also scheduled to be in the finals of the district debate tournament at the school, a couple hundred yards away. Well, we figured out how we could do both so that the second the game was over, I ran to the school, and Shumate had such integrity. People respected him. He had such gravitas that they set up the room as if I'd already been in there. And he postponed the beginning of the debate with some crazy story about my great-uncle being killed in a tightrope accident in Africa somewhere, but they believed it. Meanwhile, I'm in the bathroom changing out of a baseball uniform into a suit, made it into the room, we won district, and it was because of Shumate's integrity.
Very good. Item number 4. Was Alan Shumate a good teacher?
Alan Shumate was a legendary high school debate and speech teacher. He fielded routinely championship teams. He was president of the Texas Forensic League. And all the big schools in Dallas and Houston knew that to get to state, they had to go through Alan Shumate's debate team. But I have to confess, when I was on his team, I couldn't figure out why he was such a great teacher, or why he was considered such a great coach. I don't remember Alan Shumate ever sitting down with anyone and giving them a long list of what they did right or what they did wrong. I don't remember Alan Shumate ever standing up and giving a demonstration debate, and he certainly never rewrote any speeches for me. It was only years later that I recognized the motivational power of that glance that he would give you, of that brief, sometimes sarcastic comment, and his unfailing support. Alan Shumate had a magic about him that made his students reach deep inside of themselves to be the very best they could be.
Randy, this is for your eyes, not your nose. Randy, you're so limited in your view of Shumate being a good teacher. He was a great teacher, we all know that. But he taught us other things that we could use later in life. Because I remember going to a tournament, I don't remember where it was, I just remember we were driving down Central Expressway in Dallas, 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit, which was the norm. And he decided he needed to light a cigarette. Now don't say anything. Everyone smoked cigarettes at that point, everywhere, so that was okay. And so we're driving down the interstate, and he takes his left hand and puts it on top of the steering wheel. I didn't make a mistake, it was his left hand, and reached over to light his cigarette. I wasn't an expert on physics at that time, but I knew that the road was going straight and that the inertia was carrying us straight, but I could see a little curve that was coming up. And he couldn't see the curve because he was trying to light the cigarette at the end. So I very carefully avoided the flame and grabbed the steering wheel and very gently drove us around the curve. That situation repeated itself many times through our high school career. That was such an excellent thing that he taught me how to do, because later in life when I became later in life when I became a pilot and flew small airplanes, you all know you have controls on both sides of the airplane. Most pilots are completely uncomfortable flying from the right seat. I'm actually as good there as I am the other side.
All right, finally, was Alan Shumate a mentor?
I cannot think of anyone that I personally know that has had a more positive impact on more young lives than Alan Shumate. But he mentored by example. I don't recall Alan Shumate ever telling me what to do or not do unless I asked him. But I always left our talks
with a strong sense of what was the right thing to do. I suspect I'm not the only person in this room who would be devastated if they thought they had disappointed Alan Shumate.
Let's take those points one at a time, Randy. The first point, positive impact on young lives, I'll stipulate that. He was very strong impact. Point number two, he showed others by setting an example. Yes, he did. Because when he supported something, he has supported it with all of his being. The University of Texas, for example. Big University of Texas fan. Those of you that knew him know how much he supported the Longhorn Network and called it the finest programming on television. He was actually recognized early on in the life of that network as one of the 12 families in Texas that actually watched it. But it was because of his grassroots effort that that channel has now become a success. And in honor of that, I've worn my best burnt, sorry, just couldn't do it. And finally, Randy speaks from the heart on that final point, that you really did not want to disappoint Shumate. Centerfold. Laterno. In closing, it should be clear that people did know where Alan Shumate stood at all times. That he did go to bat for people. He was a man of integrity. He was a good teacher, and he was a mentor for all of us.